I came home that night with the faint scent of another woman's perfume still clinging to my jacket. Vanessa had hugged me goodbye outside the restaurant, and the smell of her hair, something sweet and expensive, had stuck to the fabric. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I parked the truck in front of the old wooden house. "I'm home safe. Thanks for tonight. I had a really good time." I read the message twice, then locked the screen without replying. The date had been fine. Vanessa was beautiful, polite, and clearly interested. She laughed at my jokes, asked about my work, and even said she liked men who could fix things with their hands. On paper, everything was perfect, but the entire evening, my mind kept drifting somewhere else. I stepped out of the truck and walked up the gravel path toward the two-story house I'd been renting for almost 2 years. The porch light was still on, casting a warm, yellow glow across the wooden steps. I expected the house to be quiet. Olivia usually went to bed early when she had early client meetings. She was sitting on the porch. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the small table beside her. She wore a thin, gray sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and her dark hair was loose, moving slightly in the night breeze. She looked like she'd been out there for a while. I stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You're still up?" Olivia turned her head slowly. Her eyes moved from my face to the jacket I was wearing, then down to the phone still in my hand. She didn't smile. "How was the date?" she asked. I shrugged and climbed the last 2 steps. "It was okay. She's nice." She nodded once like she already knew that answer. Then she looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that made me feel like she could see straight through my eye. I reached for the door handle, and that's when she said it. "She doesn't love you like I do." My hand froze on the doorknob. The words hung in the cool night air between us. I turned my head slowly. Olivia was staring straight ahead now at the empty street, her fingers wrapped tightly around the mug even though the tea had gone cold. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She stood up abruptly, almost knocking the chair back. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. I'm tired." I shouldn't have said that. "Forget it." Before I could answer, she walked past me, opened the front door, and disappeared into the house. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there alone on the porch, key still in my hand. The scent of Vanessa's perfume suddenly making me feel sick. That was the moment everything changed. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a residential electrician in Portland, Oregon. I spend my days crawling through attics, rewiring old houses, and fixing circuit breakers that haven't been touched since the 90s. It's not glamorous work, but I'm good at it. People call me when their lights go out in the middle of the night or when their kitchen outlets stop working after a storm. I show up, I fix it, I leave. Simple. 2 years ago, I needed a place to live that wasn't a noisy apartment complex or some overpriced studio downtown. Mark, one of the guys I work with, told me about a room for rent in a quiet neighborhood. 2-story wooden house. Reasonable rent. The owner lived downstairs and only wanted one tenant. That owner was Olivia Bennett. She was 30 at the time, tall with dark hair that always looked like she'd run her hands through it while working, and eyes that noticed everything. She worked as a freelance interior designer, turning old apartments and small cafes into places people actually wanted to spend time in. Her living room was always full of fabric samples, mood boards, and half-drunk cups of tea. When I first met her, she laid out the rules clearly. No overnight guests without notice. Don't touch each other's food without asking. Split utilities evenly. Lock the doors if you come home late. Don't go into each other's rooms without permission. And, most importantly, don't ask too many personal questions if the other person doesn't want to talk. I agreed to everything. I just needed a clean, quiet place with parking for my work truck and a short drive to job sites. Olivia seemed to need exactly one responsible tenant who wouldn't cause drama. For the first few months, we kept our distance perfectly. She stayed on the first floor. I stayed on the second. We shared the kitchen and the porch, but we didn't share much else. Then little things started happening. She noticed I drank my coffee black and started leaving the pot on when she knew I had an early job. I noticed she often skipped dinner when she was deep in a project. So I started bringing home extra takeout and leaving it in the fridge with a note. She began leaving the porch light on when I worked late. I started fixing things around the house without being asked. A loose step on the stairs, a flickering light in her office. The old lock on the back door that stuck when it rained. One night her office lights shorted out. I spent 2 hours rewiring the whole room, installed new recessed lighting, and didn't charge her a cent. You didn't have to do all that, she said the next morning, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. You're the landlord, I replied. Figured it was better than the place burning down. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that made her shoulders drop and her eyes crinkle. After that, something shifted. Not in a big way, just enough that the house started feeling less like a rental and more like something else. I told myself it was nothing. She was a good landlord. I was a good tenant. That was all. But some nights when I came home late and saw that porch light still glowing, something in my chest loosened. Mark noticed I'd been single too long and set me up with Vanessa. She worked in real estate, wore expensive clothes, and smelled like money and good decisions. Our first date was at a small Italian place downtown. She was easy to talk to. She asked about my job without sounding bored. She even said she found it attractive that I worked with my hands. I should have been excited. Instead, I kept thinking about Olivia. When Vanessa said she hated the smell of fresh paint, I remembered Olivia standing in the middle of a newly painted room, breathing in deeply and saying, "That's the smell of a fresh start." When Vanessa talked about loving crowded weekend markets, I thought about Olivia sitting on the porch during a light rain, sketchbook in her lap, completely at peace. When Vanessa asked if I lived alone, I almost said no. I caught myself just in time. Olivia was my landlord. I was her tenant. That was the line we'd drawn, and I wasn't going to cross it. After the date, Vanessa texted that she had gotten home safely and thanked me for the night. I slipped my phone into my pocket and drove back to the house. The 2-story house appeared under the streetlights. The porch light was still on. Olivia was sitting there. She wore a thin sweater, both hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her eyes watching the path as if she had been waiting for a while. I smiled and said, "Hey Olivia, I just got back from a date. I think she liked me." Olivia looked at my jacket, then at the phone in my hand. "How was it?" she asked. I smiled lightly. "It was fine. She's nice." She nodded. "Do you like her?" I hesitated. "I probably need to see her again to know for sure." She went quiet. I thought the conversation was over, so I put the key into the lock. That's when Olivia spoke again. "She doesn't love you the way I do." I stood completely still. The night wind moved across the porch. The cup in Olivia's hands trembled slightly. She looked like she had just realized she said something she couldn't take back. Her face turned red. She stammered, "I'm sorry. I meant I care about you like family. I'm just tired and saying nonsense." Then she stood up, walked into the house, went straight to her room on the first floor, and closed the door. I was still standing on the porch. For the first time in 2 years, the house I had been renting suddenly felt full of things that had never been said out loud. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. "She doesn't love you like I do." The words kept looping in my head, refusing to fade. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle around me. Somewhere below on the first floor, I could hear Olivia moving. The soft creak of floorboards, the faint sound of water running in the bathroom, then silence. She was awake too. I wanted to go downstairs. I wanted to knock on her door and ask what the hell she meant. But every time I sat up, something stopped me. Fear, maybe. Or the simple fact that I didn't know what I would say if she opened that door. So I stayed in my room like a coward. The next morning, the house felt different. I came downstairs at 7 o'clock like usual, expecting to find her in the kitchen making tea or sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. But the kitchen was empty. The only sign she'd been there was a full pot of coffee on the counter and a small piece of paper beside it. "Made extra. Help yourself if you want." That was it. No signature, no smiley face, just those 6 words in her neat handwriting. I stood there holding the note for a long time. She was still taking care of me, but she didn't want to see me. I pulled out my phone and typed a message before I could overthink it. About last night. What did you mean? I hit send. No reply. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. Nothing. I poured myself a cup of coffee and drank it standing at the counter, staring at the empty staircase that led to her room. For 2 years, I told myself the things she did were just landlord things. Leaving the porch light on, making extra food, asking how my day was. All of it had felt normal, safe. Now, every memory felt different. I remembered the night I came home soaked after fixing a flooded basement. She'd handed me a towel without saying a word, then made me sit at the kitchen table while she heated up leftover soup. I'd thanked her and called her a good landlord. She just smiled and gone back to her work. I remembered the time her car wouldn't start, and I spent an hour under the hood while she stood nearby holding an umbrella over both of us. She'd said, "You really don't have to do this." I'd answered, "It's fine. I'm already here." She'd looked at me for a second too long. I'd ignored it. By the time I left for work that morning, my chest felt tight. I kept checking my phone between jobs, but there was still no reply from Olivia. Around noon, I got a message from Vanessa instead. "Hey, I had fun last night. Want to grab dinner this weekend?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "Can I get back to you later?" It wasn't fair to her. I knew that, but my head was too full of someone else to give her an honest answer. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet again. Olivia's shoes were by the door, so she was home, but her bedroom door on the first floor was closed. On the kitchen counter sat a plastic container with a sticky note on top. "Dinner. You always skip meals when you work late." I opened the container, chicken and rice, still warm. Something inside me cracked a little. I walked to her door and knocked. "Olivia, I need to talk to you." Silence. I waited almost a minute before I heard the lock turn. The door opened slowly. She stood there in an old t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair messy, like she'd been lying down. Her eyes were slightly red, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I'm sorry about last night," she said. "I had no right to say that. You can forget it ever happened." I looked at her. "Did you mean it?" The question hung between us. Olivia exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. She stepped back and let me into her room for the first time in 2 years. It was smaller than I expected. A bed, a desk covered in design sketches, a small bookshelf, and a single armchair by the window. Everything was neat except for the pile of fabric samples on the floor. She sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed standing. "I didn't plan on feeling this way," she said quietly. "I know the rules. I made them. Landlord and tenant. That's what we agreed on." I didn't interrupt. "It started small," she continued. "The way you always asked if I'd eaten when you came home late, the way you fixed things without being asked, the way you never pushed when I didn't want to talk. I told myself it was just you being decent. But then I started waiting for you to come home. I started leaving the light on even when I knew you'd be late. I started cooking extra food on purpose." She looked down at her hands. "I've been alone in this house for a long time, Nathan. After my last relationship, I built walls, rules, distance. I thought if I kept everything controlled, nothing could hurt me again. And then you moved in and slowly, without me noticing, those walls started coming down." She finally looked up at me. I didn't want to fall for my tenant. I really didn't, but I did. My throat felt tight. "I've been trying to ignore it," she said. "Trying to keep things normal. But last night, when you came home smelling like someone else, I just couldn't pretend anymore." I ran a hand through my hair. "Olivia." She held up a hand. "You don't have to say anything. I already know how this ends. You're a good guy. You won't want to make things awkward. You'll probably start looking for a new place soon." "I get it." "That's not what I'm thinking," I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're thinking about it now, though, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away, because she was right. Part of me was thinking about it. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I suddenly realized how much I didn't want to. "I've been calling you my landlord in my head for 2 years," I said. Every time I felt something, I told myself it was inappropriate, that you were off limits, that this was just a rental arrangement. Olivia stayed quiet, but last night changed everything. I continued, "And I don't know what to do with that yet." She nodded slowly. I don't want to stand here waiting for you to decide if I'm worth choosing, she said softly. The words hit me harder than I expected. She stood up and walked to the door. I think you should go upstairs, Nathan.
Take some time.
Figure out what you actually want because I can't keep doing this halfway thing anymore. I stepped out into the hallway. She didn't close the door right away. I'm not asking you to love me back,
she said.
I'm just asking you to be honest with me and with yourself. Then she gently closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time staring at the wood grain. Upstairs, my room felt 1,000 miles away. That night, I lay in bed again listening to the house breathe beneath me. I could hear her moving around downstairs. The soft sound of drawers opening. The faint clink of dishes being washed, then nothing. The distance between the first floor and the second had never felt so wide. I thought about Vanessa's message still sitting unanswered on my phone. I thought about the way Olivia's voice had cracked when she said she didn't want to wait for me to choose. And I thought about every small thing she'd done for me over the past 2 years that I had filed away under landlord duties instead of what it really was care. Real, quiet, patient care. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark, even though no one could hear me. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you. The next morning, Vanessa texted again. Hey, just checking in. Dinner this weekend? No pressure. I stared at the message for almost 10 minutes before I replied. Can we meet today instead? I need to talk to you. She agreed without asking questions. We met at the same cafe where we'd had coffee after our first date. She looked beautiful in a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back. When she saw my face, her smile faded a little. You don't look like someone who's here to plan a second date, she said gently. I sat down across from her. I'm not, I admitted.
I'm sorry.
Vanessa nodded slowly, like she'd already prepared herself for this. It's the woman you live with, isn't it?
She asked.
I blinked. How did you mention her 3 times during our date, she said with a small smile. Not by name, just her. The way your voice changed when you talked about the house. I'm not stupid, Nathan. I looked down at my coffee. I didn't mean to lead you on, I said. I really thought I was ready to meet someone new, but I'm not. Not while I'm still figuring out what's happening in my own home. Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand once. Then go home and figure it out, she said. Before that woman starts thinking she's just the backup plan. Her words stayed with me the entire drive back. When I pulled up in front of the house, my stomach dropped. Olivia's car was in the driveway and the front door was open. Inside the living room, I saw a small black suitcase sitting by the couch. She was leaving. I walked in slowly. She was in the kitchen writing something on a notepad. When she heard my footsteps, she turned around. Her eyes were tired. You're going somewhere, I said. She nodded. My sister's place. Just for a couple of weeks. I need some space. Why? Because I can't keep living under the same roof with you and pretending that nothing happened.
She said.
I can't keep cooking for you and leaving lights on and acting like I'm just being a good landlord. It's killing me. I stepped closer. I ended things with Vanessa. Olivia froze. I met her this afternoon. I continued. I told her I couldn't keep seeing her. Not when my head is somewhere else. Not when the only person I actually want to come home to is standing right in front of me. She looked at me for a long time. Don't say things like that if you're not sure, she whispered. I am sure about one thing, I said. I don't want you to leave this house. Olivia laughed, but it sounded broken. Nathan, this is my house. I know, I said. And I'm the one who can walk away anytime. That's what you're afraid of, isn't it? She didn't answer. I moved closer until there was only a foot of space between us. I've been using the word landlord like a shield for 2 years. I told her. Every time I felt something real, I told myself it was inappropriate, that you were off limits, that this was just a convenient living arrangement. But last night, when you said you didn't want to wait for me to decide if you were worth choosing, something broke open. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared you're only saying this because you saw me packing. I'm scared you'll wake up in a week and realize you made a mistake. I might be scared, too, I said. But I'm more scared of letting you walk out that door and never fixing what we broke. She looked down at the suitcase. I don't do this, she said quietly. I don't know how to be with someone who lives in my house. I don't know how to stop being your landlord and start being whatever this is. Then we figure it out together, I said. No more hiding behind rules. No more pretending the things we do for each other are just convenient. If we're scared, we say it. If we want to stay, we say it. Olivia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You really mean that? I do. She stood there for another moment, then slowly nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms. It wasn't a polite hug between landlord and tenant. It wasn't the careful distance we'd kept for 2 years. It was the kind of hug you give someone when you're finally allowing yourself to admit how much they matter. She buried her face in my chest and let out a shaky breath. We stayed like that for a long time. Later that evening, we sat on the porch together. 2 chairs side by side. No tea this time. Just the quiet sound of the neighborhood settling down for the night. We didn't hold hands. We didn't kiss.
We weren't ready for that yet.
But we weren't pretending anymore either. I still feel like I'm breaking every rule I made, Olivia said softly. Maybe the rules were never meant to last forever, I replied. She looked over at me. What happens now? I thought about it. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I want to find out with you. Olivia smiled. A real small smile that reached her eyes for the first time in days. Okay, she said. Then we take it slow. No labels. No pressure. Just honest. Honest, I agreed. We sat there until the porch light automatically clicked on, bathing us in that familiar warm glow. The same light she'd left on for me every night for 2 years without ever saying why. Now I knew. And for the first time since I moved into this house, I didn't feel like a tenant anymore. I felt like I was finally home. The weeks that followed didn't feel like the beginning of a relationship. They felt like the slow, careful rebuilding of something that had been quietly falling apart for 2 years. We didn't announce anything. We didn't suddenly start holding hands in the kitchen or calling each other babe. We didn't even kiss for the first 10 days. Everything changed in smaller, quieter ways. I stopped pretending I was just being helpful. One Saturday, I spent the entire afternoon replacing the rotting wooden railing on the porch. Olivia stood in the doorway watching me, arms crossed.
You don't have to do that, she said.
I know, I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. But I want to. She didn't argue after that. Another night, I came home late from a job that had run way over. When I walked into the kitchen, Olivia was still awake. She placed a bowl of soup in front of me, without saying a word. I looked at her.
You're still doing this, I said.
She met my eyes. It's different now.
How?
Before I did it because I was trying to be a good landlord. Now I'm doing it because I want you to know you're cared for. There's a difference. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just ate the soup while she sat across from me sketching on a napkin. Little by little, the house started to feel like ours instead of hers and mine. I fixed the loose step on the back stairs. I replaced the old, harsh porch light with a warmer bulb because she mentioned once that she liked reading outside at night. I bought a second chair and placed it next to hers without asking. When she asked why, I simply said, because I plan on sitting out here with you more often. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed. Olivia began opening up in ways she never had before. One rainy evening, we were sitting on the couch after dinner when she suddenly spoke. I used to think this house was my armor, she said quietly. After my ex left, he lived here with me for almost a year. When things got hard, he walked out. I remember standing in this exact living room watching him pack his things and thinking that I would never let anyone get that close again. So I made rules. I kept distance. I turned this place into a fortress. I stayed silent, letting her talk. Then you moved in, she continued, and you were so careful. You respected every boundary I set. You never pushed. And slowly, without me realizing it, I started lowering the walls. I started looking forward to hearing your truck pull up at night. I started leaving the light on because I wanted you to come home to something warm, not because it was a safety rule. She looked over at me. I was terrified the night I said those words on the porch. I thought I'd ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything, I said. You just stopped letting me hide. A few days later, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her. Her eyes were red. I sat down across from her. What's wrong? She tried to smile. Nothing. Just work stuff. Olivia. She hesitated, then slid one of the papers toward me. It was a letter from the bank. Property taxes had gone up significantly. There were still some old debts from when her parents transferred the house to her. If she couldn't come up with a solution soon, she might have to sell. I've been trying to figure it out on my own, she said. I didn't want to drag you into this. You're still technically my tenant. I looked at her for a long moment. Let me help. She immediately shook her head. No, this isn't your responsibility. You already do tutu around here. I'm not offering as your tenant, I said. She went still. I'm offering as the person who wants to stay in this house with you. The person who doesn't want to watch you lose the one place that's ever felt like home to either of us. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to let someone help me anymore, she whispered. Then let me show you. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. The house's electrical system was old and outdated. I could rewire the whole place, bring everything up to code, and increase the property value. The small studio space behind the garage could be turned into a rentable workspace for freelancers and photographers. Olivia had the design skills. I had the technical skills. Together, we could make the house support itself instead of draining her. When I showed her the plan the next morning, she stared at it for a long time. You really think we can do this? She asked. I think we can do a lot of things, I said, if we stop pretending we're still just landlord and tenant. She reached across the table and took my hand. For the first time, she didn't let go right away. Later that evening, while I was washing dishes, Olivia walked into the kitchen. She stood beside me for a moment, then leaned in and kissed me softly on the cheek. It was the first time she had kissed me. She pulled back quickly, her face flushed. I'm sorry, she said. I don't know why I did that. I turned off the water and looked at her. I'm not sorry, I replied. She smiled, small and shy, then walked out of the kitchen like she needed to escape her own courage. I stood there with soapy hands, staring at the empty doorway, and realized something important. The walls she had built around this house were finally coming down, and I was the one standing inside them with her. The months that followed were the busiest and the quietest of my life. We didn't rush into anything. We worked on the house instead. Every weekend, I rewired sections of the old electrical system while Olivia redesigned the spaces around me. She chose soft colors for the porch, added warm lighting in the studio behind the garage, and turned the dusty storage room into a bright, welcoming workspace with plants and clean white walls. I installed new outlets, fixed the grounding, and made sure everything met code. When clients started renting the studio by the hour, photographers, designers, writers, the extra income slowly began to ease the financial pressure on her. The house stopped feeling like a burden. It started feeling like something we were building together. One evening in late autumn, I came home later than usual. The air was crisp and the leaves had already started turning. As I walked up the path, I saw her sitting on the porch exactly where she had been that night months ago. The night, everything changed. 2 steaming mugs sat on the small table between the chairs. I smiled as I climbed the steps. You're getting predictable, I said. Olivia looked up at me, a soft smile on her face. I figured you'd be tired. Thought you might want something warm. I sat down in the chair beside her, the one I had placed there weeks earlier, and picked up the mug. The tea was exactly how I liked it. No sugar.
Strong.
We sat in comfortable silence for a while watching the street lights flicker on one by one. Home tonight on Mekong? She asked quietly. I nodded. A little. But I wanted to come home. She glanced over at me. To this house. I turned to look at her.
To you.
Olivia lowered her gaze, but I saw the small smile she tried to hide. A moment later she spoke again, her voice softer. I still feel embarrassed about what I said that night. Which part? She gave me a look. Don't pretend you don't remember. I chuckled. You mean the part where you told me the woman I was dating didn't love me like you did? Olivia covered her face with one hand. I can't believe I actually said that out loud. I reached over and gently pulled her hand down. You were just being honest, I said, and I needed to hear it. She studied my face for a long moment. If I hadn't said anything that night, would you have figured it out on your own? I thought about it honestly. Probably not for a long time, I admitted. I was really good at lying to myself. I would have kept calling you my landlord. I would have kept going on dates with women who weren't you. And every night I would have come home and told the only person I actually wanted to talk to about my day. Olivia leaned her head against my shoulder. I'm glad I said it, she whispered, even if it was terrifying. I rested my cheek against her hair. Me too. We stayed like that until the tea grew cold. The porch light glowed warmly above us, the same light she had left on for me for over 2 years. Only now I finally understood what it had always meant. This house had never just been a rental. It had been her way of saying come home without ever having to say the words out loud. And now I was finally listening. Some loves don't begin with grand gestures or perfect confessions. Sometimes they begin with a single sentence spoken on a quiet porch when someone's heart is breaking. A sentence that breaks every unspoken rule. A sentence that forces two people to stop hiding. Olivia and I didn't have a dramatic beginning. We had 2 years of careful distance followed by one painful truth that changed everything. But as I sat there with her head on my shoulder in the quiet house behind us, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't renting anymore. I was home.